Hello and welcome to this Project in a Box video. This is session 2 of our detailed look at how to work with piabx files. In this session we're going to pick up where we left off in the intro by taking a more detailed look at the viewing of piabx files. So here I am in the browser interface of the main application, and I can select the process that I'm interested in. And in the normal way I'll be presented with the Explorer, and that will have some files in. Now when I come to click on the file, we can preview many of the files, file types that are most commonly used directly in the browser, and there's no exception there for piabx files. And what we get is this preview of the sections and the text and the images and all the rest of the content that makes up the file. We get this in our Word type display, which is just a sequence of the content running down the page. We call this the preview mode, and we can see that for each of the particular files. So this is a blank template. If I come to a file which has got some content in, like the mandate here, and you'll see it follows the styles that are set for that particular template using the colors and font arrangements for those, and logos, etc. as well. Often when we're reading in this sort of space, we might want to use the shrink grow controls up here to change the amount of space that we have, especially if there's lots of content to get through, and of course we can move that back afterwards like that. Of course this page arrangement can also change. If we're looking at this on a phone, for example, it will often be portrait rather than the landscape that we see here on a laptop. So it's really just a case of clicking on the file, and then you get your preview straight away. Sometimes you'll see a file which is checked out and being worked on by somebody else, but of course the system still holds the last checked in version, and so it can give you a preview of that particular file, as we see here, and this one's got some images in it as well, and some tables and lots of other sorts of information. So that's pretty straightforward. We just get that view however we need it in the space that's available. We can also print these files if we want to, using the print option here, and this creates a printer friendly page like this, using a pre-configured set of instructions within the template, and we then get our option to print this. So from the browser we can get a reasonable document print. We're going to talk about the client a little bit later, and we get more print options there. And of course if we want a full page reading experience, we can use that print to give us that full page experience as well. Now sometimes we don't want to just read now directly in the browser, but we might want to take that file, that version of the file, and read it later offline. So in that case we can switch out of the basic mode into the advanced mode here, and then we can take a view of that file. Now that's going to give us the file as a download here, and when I then open that, that's going to open using the associated application on my desktop, which in this case is the piabx viewer, which is what we would normally get this in when we use the client. So I can see that here, and of course because I'm viewing the file, it's not editable. I can see the content, I can copy and paste it if I want to, but I'm not able to edit that content at all. So that means I can keep that file now on my machine if I want to, save it, give it to somebody else, use it for a period of time to read and reflect on, and use in meetings, etc. But that's still a view only version of the file. You see that's built into the name here, and of course that means that we can't edit any of this content. So even from the browser I'm able to do that, and I was able to do that even with a file that's currently being worked on by somebody else, because again it's going to give me the latest copy as a view. We can't have two checkout copies, but we can have as many view copies as we want and a single checkout copy. So that really is very straightforward from the browser. Of course we're going to come back into the basic mode because that's generally easier for previewing things live into the screen here, rather than having to download the file and use the viewer app. So in the browser, very straightforward. If we come to the Windows application instead, many of the same sort of things are relevant. but we don't get that preview live in the screen. Instead, it automatically opens with the piabx viewer application. So I'm going to choose one of my files here. You'll see it's opened with a view in the file name, and of course I've got something that I can read, but I can't modify. And that lock is saved into the structure of the file. It's not something you can easily switch off from that file. Of course, if you use piabx files just normally, you create a piabx file and you can share it around amongst yourselves, like you could a Word file, for example. You probably won't set that flag, but when that flag has been set by the application, you can't take that off to make that file then editable. So you're given a fundamentally locked, uneditable version of the file. And that's the case if we have a look at this mandate here. We can see that one, and we can see this does have content. Now, this content is available to me. I can copy it and paste it in somewhere else. I can reuse it, but what I can't do is modify it into here. It's fundamentally locked in that file as that content. Now, when we're here, we also again have some preview options. We can in fact move to the preview, which is like the one in the browser, the down the page, if that's what we're more comfortable in reading. But actually the tabbed arrangement is generally easier to find your way around one section at a time in the tabs, rather than everything down the page. This is obviously a relatively simple example, and there's only a few sections here, but some documents might have 15 or 20 sections, and therefore you can find the things you want much easier than having to scroll down pages and pages of content. When it comes to printing, we have several options here. We can do the HTML, print and preview, which is just like the one we saw in the browser. It's going to be the same result as we got if we printed from the browser. But we also have a more structured print preview, which we can offer here. And this is produced by ourselves, by the code, and it gives you a nicer reflection on the document. It doesn't have that HTML page update type element at the end, and it allows you to apply headers and footers to it, and it's overall a nicer format. And again, you have options for the setup of that. You can choose margin sizes and colors, and whether you want portrait or landscape and all those sorts of things. So that's if you want a hard copy, and again, that's sometimes the case. Some audiences prefer hard copies, and also sometimes people like to take things to meetings and may not have devices or internet access available at that time. So that's the client. Of course, you'll need the client, the viewer app, to be able to view piabx files when they're not in the browser. It's installed as standard alongside all of the Project in a Box applications. So if you download Community Edition, you get piabx Viewer. If you download Planner, you get piabx Viewer. Personal Edition, Small Team, Enterprise Edition. If you download the Portable Client or the Deployment Client for Live Edition, you'll also get the piabx Viewer included. So if you're dealing with Project in a Box and you're using piabx files, it will be there. The issue is if you want to give it to one of your colleagues, the piabx file to view, then they will need the viewer, unless you can give them direct access to the browser, in which case they can log on to the Project in a Box website, register to download, and when they get Community Edition and Planner, they'll get the piabx Viewer included, bundled in with that. So that's most of what I wanted to say about viewing files. There is much more to talk about when it comes to editing the content, and in fact in videos 3 and 4 we're going to split down the editing to look at editing in the browser in session 3 and editing in the piabx Viewer in session 4. So depending on which of those is most relevant to you, you can choose one video or the other. So I hope you found that useful. If that was your first introduction, I suggest you do try the actual video 1, the intro, as well, because that'll give you a good overview of the general topic. Okay, thank you very much.